Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Analysing Anfield, your tactics and analytics podcast, courtesy of the Blood Red channel. I'm Josh Williams, and for the third time in a row, I am joined by Andrew Beasley. And Bees, we have a serious win to talk about this week.
Yeah, it was good, wasn't it? I mean, it's just this strange season continuing, really, where Liverpool either seem to score 6 or 7 or 9 goals, or they really struggle in games. And thankfully, this was one of the former. I saw a stat; it's crazy. They've scored 6 goals 4 times for the first time since 1964, and yet you could say they're probably having one of their worst seasons. I mean, not in that entire period, but for quite some time. So I think they're lucky they were playing a pretty poor Leeds side who sort of seemed to give up in the second half a little bit. But fair play. I mean, hopefully, Liverpool could take some confidence from that. We've seen before they've had these big wins and haven't really kicked on, but it would be nice if they could finish the season with a bit of a flourish to raise a bit of optimism ahead of next season.
Yeah, well, we are going to get into it today. Apologies for being a day late in comparison to usual with the podcast. I am running purely on paracetamol at the minute. I'm not really that well, so I needed a bit of a break yesterday. But Liverpool's win has picked me up a little bit. Hopefully, I'll be well enough to go to the match on the weekend, and hopefully Liverpool can keep this. I don't know if you can call it form yet, but hopefully Liverpool can keep this up. But in terms of the Leeds game, mate, if we reverse it back before we kind of touch on some transfer rumours which have emerged in the past week or so regarding Ryan Gravenberch. Obviously, in terms of the Leeds game, I don't know what you were expected going into the game, but I didn't think it'd be as easy as it was.
No, it was quite unexpected in quite a lot of ways. I mean, it's one of those games you look at the first sort of half an hour, and from a Liverpool perspective, attacking wise, nothing really happened. I'm not sure they had any chances of note before they scored. Leeds had one from a set piece, but Liverpool didn't create a lot. And it felt quite boring, to be honest. I mean, they were keeping the ball well, which is something they haven't done too much of, particularly away from home this season. But neither were they creating anything. So you can look back now and say, oh, 6-1, amazing. But, for half an hour, it felt like it was going to be a bit of a struggle to sort of break Leeds down. But obviously they did, and sort of kicked on from there. But sort of sterile domination is the phrase, I think, for the first half hour or so.
Yeah, well, I think I looked on Twitter actually after the first half an hour. I think that this is an important talking point actually from the game, because for the first half an hour, obviously, as you say, we didn't create an awful lot. I think particularly our final third play and our final ball was miles off it. But when I was looking at Twitter, which again I always say this, we should never do it during the game. It's just never a good idea. But when I was looking at Twitter, I was quite surprised by the I don't know, criticism that Liverpool were getting, because I think one thing I've been frustrated by all season really is how Liverpool have struggled to control games and struggled to establish themselves as the dominant side in games. And I think even though our final third play was miles off it early on, we definitely had like an element of control over the middle of the park, and the 3-2-5 system that we're currently playing with possession did seem to have a bit of an influence on that. We were regaining the ball pretty quickly after losing it. Some of that you can put down to Leeds just being miles off it. But that sterile domination at the start, particularly as well, we need to throw in there. This was an away game. It's Ellen Road. It can get up and go against you if you let the game go a little bit more basketball. So overall, that first half hour period, I was a lot more kind of like I don't know, satisfied, calm with that. I expected it to be a bit more ferocious in terms of the ground than it actually was. And I think that stemmed from us being really patient, controlling, almost a little bit Guardiola in the way we did things.
Yeah, it's obviously it's hard to know what to expect from Liverpool this season, particularly away from home. I mean, it wasn't negative. It just sort of felt like it didn't feel like a goal was coming, and then all of a sudden they'd scored 2. I mean, obviously Leeds have their reputation as one of the more sort of high pressing teams, always low PPDA figures, stuff like that, and there didn't really seem too much of that. Like they were quite content to sort of sit in this block, and Liverpool were playing in front of them, and it sort of felt to me like nothing was going to happen. But then obviously there was the first goal obviously inevitably changed it. And I think it's interesting, so many so many stats and things have come out about Trent Alexander-Arnold's performance, and understandably so, because he was really good. And, you know, a first player to get 2 assists and complete over 100 passes, or one of very few players to do that, something like that. But it was actually one of his unsuccessful passes that led to the goal, because he played it forward. I think it was far post. Someone intercepted it, but then it came back to Trent, and the move unfolded from there. So it's funny how he had this really great passing performance, and it's an unsuccessful pass that sets up the first goal, sort of indirectly.
Yeah, well, I mean, we can touch on Trent, I suppose. He was a player that I certainly picked up on late in the game. I think he was the amount of times he was getting on the ball was insane. And I got to a point where I was like, this has got to be record breaking this. And when I checked, I think, in fact, I'll double check now, just as I'm here. I think it was 153 touches that he accumulated.
Yeah, sounds about right.
151 apparently, according to FB Ref. I think who scored had it down as 153 though, unless I'm mistaken. But I think it was the most passes he's ever posted in a single game in a red shirt.
Yeah.
Which sounds quite simplistic, but if you have a tactic, and again, there's lots of context missing here in terms of like Leeds just allowing this to happen, really. But if you have a tactic that does allow your best players to get on the ball the most, Trent's obviously touched the ball, I think, the most in Liverpool team, ahead of Van Dijk.
Mm-hmm.
And last week, I wrote a piece on the fact that Salah touched the ball more than any other Premier League game this season. In this game, he touched the ball the second most in terms of Premier League games this season. So it's getting Salah a lot more involved. It's getting Trent a lot more involved. In my opinion, they're Liverpool's 2 most valuable players in terms of possession.
Mm-hmm.
So aside from potentially Thiago, you could probably throw in there as well. But I think any tactic that does that surely can't be a bad thing.
No, definitely. I mean, we spoke last week, and I was sort of skeptical, saying, Trent's, best right back in the world, or up there, certainly, maybe they should leave him where he is. And you don't want to read too much into a game against a, poor Leeds side. But I mean, it certainly looks like this tactical shape is coming together really nicely with how they're playing. And as you say, if it's getting Trent and Salah on the ball more, then that can only be a good thing. We said last week Salah had 10 shots against Arsenal, which was the most he'd ever had. And I don't think he had that, he didn't have that many this week, but he certainly scored a couple of goals, both on counter-attacks as well. So, anything that gets them on the ball more has to be a good thing. And, I mean, not to get ahead of ourselves, but obviously Nottingham Forest at home this week, I mean, whatever happens, Liverpool are going to, you would think, dominate the ball there. So you can probably expect similar sort of numbers from Trent and Salah once again, I should think.
Yeah, well, one interesting thing about Trent's performance, as a general absolute vanilla statistic that I do use more often than I probably should on this podcast, is just plain old passing accuracy. Because I do think it offers an insight into which players are taking risks and things like that. And if you look at Trent's career in the Premier League since his debut, he averages about 73.3% pass completion. So he's losing the ball a fair bit, and that stems from the amount of things he's trying. In this game against Leeds, obviously it probably stemmed from Liverpool's domination and the fact he was able to get on the ball so often. But he posted his highest pass completion for the season by some distance. He completed 89.6% of his passes. His previous best for the season was 84%-ish. And I think you still want Trent playing those killer passes. But I think this season in particular, and I think I might have touched on this last week or the week before or something, I don't think Liverpool have the safety net this season to be able to sweep up Trent's killer balls that don't come off. And if he's now going to occupy this inverted role, it's simply going to result in him probably keeping the ball more often and being a bit more calculated in when he does take them risks. Whereas I think when he's deployed as this offensive playmaker right back, I think he is inclined to, like, almost every time he's on the ball, it's his responsibility in his own head to kill the game, to do something to split the defence open. And in this role, I think he got the balance really, really right in terms of his performance when it comes to keeping the ball, but also splitting open defences.
Yeah, definitely. Because obviously, a game like that against Leeds, Liverpool with a lot of possession, obviously recycling it, side to side, back and forth, and stuff like that. I mean, the simple fact is that if Trent's in the middle, it's going to come to him more often than it is if he's on one side. Just the very nature of the ball going sort of side to side. If it's in the middle, it goes from you to you in both directions. And he just seemed to got that really nice knack. Saw it for the last goal of just sort of like knowing when to go, just sort of receive the ball, but then to move forward, not huge distance, but just find that angle and find that good position just from a sort of small dribble forward, and then play that diagonal ball to Nunes. I mean, they're not identical, but I mean, he's got 3 assists for Nunes now, and they're all sort of broadly similar. Trent having the ball in a kind of central area, slight sort of angle, diagonal on the pass, and Nunes does it from there. We saw it against Wolves in the cup game, and then the game at Newcastle, and then at Leeds, as we say. And obviously, not that Trent can't deliver the ball to Nunes from the wing, but obviously it's that thing of just like getting the ball in a central area, just buying a little yard or two of space, and then he can play these balls, and they're not travelling as far as if he's on the wing, just a slightly more sort of direct pass through to Nunes, which obviously he's going to love. So yeah, it's another sort of tactical benefit of this new system, which is taking shape.
Yeah, when you mentioned that, then I did think of the Newcastle goal actually, and I think it does offer an insight into potentially if we are going to stick with this kind of new look possession shape. It would probably allow Nunes to play as the central number 9 if we want him to, because behind him there would be a kind of box midfield really in terms of Trent and Fabinho, and then the 2 high number 8s. So Nunes wouldn't really have to do as much dropping deeper, linking with the play like Firmino was done and like Gakpo was doing lately. And if you think of that, if Nunes was to play as the 9 within this system, that would open up the left side for Luis Diaz potentially. And I think Gakpo, to be honest, in this kind of system, could even play as the left side of number 8. Because if he did, and Liverpool are dominating the ball, you're basically playing as a number 10, really, for the most part, certainly against Leeds. It's only in certain situations you have to track back and actually perform as a number 8. But what's your stance on this kind of narrative that's emerged that potentially Liverpool don't need an additional midfielder because of this Trent thing? I mean, obviously we still need midfielders regardless, but I've seen some people saying like maybe we can remove the signature of one of them because Trent is now doing it. What's your stance on that?
Yeah, I'm not sure about that, to be honest. I think that would be a brave or possibly foolish call to make at this point. But I mean, he's still a right back. As much as he's moving into these areas, he is still playing primarily as right back. And it seems like, he can play midfield now, but it seems that way because it was against Leeds and Liverpool dominated the ball so much. He's not going to be able to do that as much in quite a lot of games. So yeah, I wouldn't be sort of abandoning the search for several midfielders in the thought process that Trent can take one of the spots or anything like that, even starting from right back. But yeah, it certainly changes things because obviously they're sort of playing this 3-2-5 system. So it probably means you could possibly get away with not needing quite so many midfielders. But yeah, I wouldn't be taking that chance myself.
No, I think that's an important point to make in terms of Trent is still a right back in this system. He's just inverting into midfield when Liverpool have possession. Liverpool have not made a seismic change to now start playing 3-2-5. It's 3-2-5 when Liverpool have the ball completely secured, basically. Whether that will change, I don't know. Whether it'll become 3-2-5 on a permanent basis, like with and without the ball, remains to be seen. But right now, Trent is still a right back. And I do think it impacts transfer business a little bit, though, in terms of if we're doing this, maybe we do open the door to kind of more offensive number 8. Some of the players we've been linked with, and we're going to touch on one soon. Say, for example, Alexis McAllister, Mason Mount, even Matthias Nunes, who I have probably shown myself to be a little bit less keen on this podcast that we sign him. Most of that has stemmed from me being concerned that those players don't really tackle Liverpool's primary issue, which is on the defensive side of the game. Like, just for a bit of context on that, I've been checking the numbers lately, and it is quite stark. Because if you look at the goals scored and the goals conceded columns, Liverpool's attack and defence both look about the same level. Whereas if you look at the underlying numbers, you get a bit more of a picture then. So in terms of expected goals per match, Liverpool are third in the league. Third best attack in the league behind City and Arsenal, which is what many people would probably expect.
Yeah.
On the defensive side of the game, though, in terms of what we concede, in terms of expected goals, I think that is either joint 12th or joint 13th in the Premier League, which is bad. And for a bit of context, the teams that were joint with Wolves and Southampton, bottom of the league, and I'm not sure where Wolves are right now, but I know they were bottom of the league around World Cup time. So it's really a massive defensive drop. So I've been looking at that for the season, thinking like any midfielders we sign, they have to be kind of like a Tchouaméni, Caicedo kind of player who's going to win the ball. If we're playing with this system now, those number 8s that Liverpool sign can be these kind of attack-minded De Bruyne, Odegaard type players. So, but again, regarding Trent, I mean, if between now and the end of the season he does absolutely dominate like he did against Leeds every single week, then I don't know. We'll see what happens. But right now, it does feel early days, and you do have to put a bit of something on the fact that Leeds were just horrendous, really, weren't they?
Yeah, like I say, you have to view everything that happened in that context that Leeds weren't very good. I mean, I think the thing with the transfers, like, I would like to think that the planning for this summer has been going on all season. I mean, it must have done, you would think, with the issues Liverpool have clearly had in the midfield and stuff like that. And I hope whatever their plan is, because their plans have tended to work in the past, not been flawless, but tended to work, I don't want them to abandon what they've got in mind just because Trent's had a good game at Leeds playing in this sort of inverted role or anything like that. Because we don't know if it'll, as we said, if it'll sort of be repeatable to that extent every week. It almost certainly won't be. We've seen them move away from Bellingham, obviously, but they will have had other targets lined up. So hopefully they're not going to sort of throw away whatever plan they had just on the basis of what we've seen. But it's interesting what you say about it possibly changes the profile of midfielder. They might need a bit more. I mean, those defensive numbers you mentioned, I mean, I think Liverpool are third bottom for big chances conceded, and that's the real problem. I was looking at Alisson's figures yesterday or earlier this week, and he's faced the highest quality chance of any goalkeeper in Europe's Big Five leagues. Liverpool don't concede a ton of shots, but they tend to be of high quality chances. And he's faced the highest quality chance. So the fact he's the biggest overperforming goalkeeper just makes his performance even more remarkable, really. I mean, he's saved about 11 goals more than expected, I think, last time I checked. And I think Jan Oblak did something similar maybe about 3 or 4 years ago, but otherwise it's the highest performance by any goalkeeper in the big leagues in the last few years. And he's doing that from these really great chances that Liverpool are offering up. So it will be interesting to see, like, if Trent and Fabinho form a sort of midfield duo, as we say, Trent starting at right back, but as a sort of duo, and if that'll offer better protection, because obviously any debate about Trent invariably comes back to his defending and the issues he has there. So are they going to be exploited if he's sort of playing in a midfield role, or will it be easier for him? I mean, I guess we'll have to wait and see when they play against a better team from Leeds, as we keep saying. And we probably won't get that answer this weekend either. But it's interesting to see if they do go in that direction. Obviously, Klopp in the past as well has sort of got on record saying he doesn't like a back three. So I mean, obviously this isn't a back three in the traditional sense, but it might mean that they don't permanently switch to an actual starting formation of sort of 3-2-5, 3-2-4-1, something like that. I guess it's just a really interesting time because there's a lot of questions, a lot of things up in the air with Liverpool's midfield, and this has thrown another thing into the mix, albeit this is a positive thing into the mix when obviously a lot of the debate has been negative for the last year, and rightly so. So, yeah, lots of question marks. But main thing, as I say, I hope they don't sort of rip up their plans based purely on what we've seen. But it should offer a new dimension, which is really interesting.
Yeah, well, as I said, I mean, some of the players Liverpool have been linked with already on the back of this tactical shift now look better suited. I mean, I'm going to do a what's it called? Like a video with Redmen TV this week. It's coming out tonight, actually. It's Friday night on how it impacts Liverpool's transfer business. Because I do think it has quite an impact, but it has an impact in terms of suddenly a lot of the targets we've been linked with now look better suited to me, because a lot of the players we've been linked with are quite offensive-minded number 8s, and I've been a little bit concerned that, like, Klopp, Linda's obsessed with this attacking football. You still need to do the opposite end, essentially, and you still need those kind of piano carriers, really. And I don't think Liverpool particularly have those, but you've just been touching on Alisson there. We might as well use this as an excuse to actually do the proper numbers. I've just checked Europe. So across Europe's top 5 leagues this season, Alisson has saved about 11.6 goals more than expected, which is top of the whole of Europe. It's not even close either, really. The next best is an overperformance of 8.2 goals. That is Frederick Ronno, who is Danish and plays in goal for Union Berlin. Then Bernd Leno, fully enough, for Fulham on an overperformance of 7.1 goals. And then Jevan Diouf, who plays in goal for Reims in League One. Then Marc-Andre ter Stegen for Barcelona. So Alisson is out on his own in terms of Liverpool's, in terms of like shot stopping and things like that. But that's kind of disguised Liverpool's defensive game in a bit of a way, really. And that's why, look at the expected goals numbers, Liverpool do have to get better defensively. But I thought it was interesting that when Klopp was asked after the game against Leeds by I think it was Carragher, he asked why have you made this change? Is it to get sent on the ball more, or is it to be better defensively? And Klopp kind of said both, really. But I do think a lot of it does stem from this elements of control that we've been lacking. I think one thing he might have pointed out was at no point really in the whole game was anybody really engaging in a 1v1 defensive situation. He was constantly like Liverpool players doubling up in certain situations. The counter pressing was good. I'm sure you've seen the meme of Klopp kind of you've seen it?
Yeah,
he's laughing or whatever
because it was so good, basically in the 92nd minute or whatever it was.
Yeah. Well, I think any system that provides us a bit of platform like that to press and regain the ball as quickly as we did, it bodes well, really. But yeah, I do want to touch on Liverpool's finishing. You touched on it earlier as soon as we started the podcast. I do think it's weird. For the season now, Liverpool are still underperforming in terms of expectation, but it's only by about 1.2 goals now.
Mm-hmm.
But we seem to have got a lot of that back in terms of a normal level in about 3 games, really. Like against Leeds, we posted an expected goals of 2.7, which is enough to win any game, really. But we scored 6.
Yeah.
And I think against Manchester United, I'll double check that now. But
something similar. I think it was about 3 XG or something like that in that game. Yeah.
2.8 it was, and we scored 7. And against Bournemouth, we posted 3.3 and scored 9. Now, I will say, if you're posting 3.3, you can score 9, to be honest, because you're posting a lot there. That's a lot in terms of expected goals, in terms of shots and chances and things. But it does seem weird how Liverpool seem to, once they kind of get rolling, it is very much like a snowball, isn't it?
Yeah, they're still very good at making the most of these sort of situations. The attack hasn't been too much of a problem all season, at least in terms of chance creation. As you say there, it's the finishing, and it's just really strange. Like before they played Leeds, a lot was made of the fact they hadn't scored a goal away from home against the bottom 6 sides. And I did something with the numbers earlier this week. You can put the shot values into the sort of simulator thing, and it says how many goals you should probably score from those chances. And basically, it came out as a 0% chance they wouldn't have scored in any of those games. And yet that's exactly what happened. I guess most notably, you've got Salah missing a penalty at Bournemouth is probably the obvious example. But again, looking ahead to this weekend in a way, like Nottingham Forest, they had 4 clear-cut chances there, didn't take any of them. 4 at Bournemouth, didn't take any of them. And when you look at the shooting figures, I mean, obviously, Nunes is the biggest underperformer, which I don't think will surprise anybody. He's scored 2.2 goals fewer than expected, at least according to FB Ref anyway. And I think a lot of people would expect that. You know, he has missed some big chances when clean through and stuff like that. That isn't that much of a surprise. But behind him, you've got 3 players who are all under by at least a goal, and it's Robertson, Konate, and Henderson. I mean, these are guys who barely even have any shots. You know, Robertson's had 13, Konate 7, Henderson 17. And between them, they're basically 3.5 goals below expected. I mean, I can remember Robertson having some half-decent chances. I can't even picture any for the other 2 particularly. I mean, Konate will obviously be from set plays, I guess. And, I'm not sure about Henderson. But, you even go further down. I mean, Jota and Salah 0.8 below expectation. They're not hugely underperforming, but if everybody more or less is underperforming, then you've got an issue. And it's only, I think, Firmino is massively overachieving, 4 goals more than expected. Diaz and Gakpo 1.3 above. But basically, if you take any sort of level of under or over performance in the league this season, Liverpool have got 6 players who are over and somewhere probably around 15, 16 who are under. And that's, you just can't balance like that. And that's why they've ended up in the position they are. You know, I think we said, maybe it was last week, but a lot of those games against the poorer teams, they haven't played great. You know, no one's claiming that they are, but they have had the chances to get things from those games, and they often didn't. And, it doesn't mean that everything's automatically going to be fine next season. It doesn't, like to talk about regression to the mean and stuff like that. You know, they're not automatically all going to get back on track, next season. They may have overperformed in the past and stuff like that. They probably have. These things come and go in waves. But it's just another thing that's hampered them and made their results worse than they perhaps should have been.
Yeah, it has been a curious one. You've just mentioned the midfield goal scorer there, and actually, I thought it was interesting recently. I think it might have been Robbie Fowler's column or something like that, but he pointed out that in terms of the Premier League this season, Liverpool don't actually have a single centre mid with more than 1 goal in the season in the Premier League. Now, I'm not sure how much that matters in your eyes. I think it is a bit more of an age-old Premier League thing that you need a centre mid who gets you 10 goals, like a Gerrard or a Lampard, Vieira, Yaya Toure. It does feel very Premier League. Yeah. But Harvey Elliott's got 1. Stefan Bajcetic has got 1. Ox has got 1. Henderson none, Thiago none, Milner none, Curtis Jones none, Naby Keita none. So I think, as I said, I don't really know how much it matters. And I think if we was to get someone like a Bellingham, obviously that would probably get addressed because I think he is good alive and late. But in terms of the summer, again, going forward to this Liverpool rebuild, it will be interesting to see how much Klopp adds in the engine room in terms of an attacking threat, even if it's just one player who can do the box-to-box stuff and arriving late and stuff. But I'm not sure if you've got any thoughts on that one, whether it even matters. Liverpool, when we won the league, Henderson, Wijnaldum, Fabinho, that did feel very defensive if you want, but then Wijnaldum could also pop up with these valuable goals when you need them to.
Yeah, I think it is a bit of an old school idea, like you say there. I think it's one of those things. It probably feels important if you're a team that plays with 1 or 2 strikers, but Liverpool normally play with 3. When you've got Firmino, Mane and Salah at the top of their game for a few years, it probably doesn't really matter if your midfielders score that many goals or not. I think as well, it sort of gets overlooked. I mean, most people probably think that Oxlade-Chamberlain hasn't been that great since he got injured in 2017-18, but he was actually the team's 4th top scorer behind the front 3 in 2019-20 when they won the league. I think he got 8 in all competitions, something like that, which is not like a huge amount, but as the next best behind the established front 3, it's not a bad effort. And also that season we saw goals from the players you mentioned. I mean, obviously Fabinho famously scored in the Man City game, the 3-1. That was a hugely important game. And obviously Henderson got an assist in that game as well, because it's not just goals as well, it's assists. I mean, obviously we don't see that many assists generally from the Liverpool midfield. I mean, I think against Leeds, obviously Curtis Jones did a great pass for Jota. I think someone like him can probably add a few goals and assists. Whether he's going to play enough to add more than that, perhaps not. But I don't think it's something they need to be too concerned about when they're going to be playing three forwards and stuff like that. But I guess it's like everything. If you can add that as well, then happy days. But I don't think an out-and-out goal-scoring midfielder is something they need to be focusing upon. As we've said, it's the sort of going the other way has been far the bigger issue.
Yeah, well, that kind of brings us on to, I suppose, our next talking point, and that is Liverpool do seem to have stronger than usual transfer links with a certain Ryan Gravenberch, who plays for Bayern Munich, moved to Germany last summer from Ajax for relatively cheap fee, actually. I think it was around 20 million at the time. Hasn't really played too much this season. Been much of a bench option, certainly under Nagelsmann. I don't know what Tuchel thinks of him particularly just yet. But the word is that Liverpool are talking to his camp, and Liverpool are interested, and I've seen some people say the deal's even been done and all this stuff. So I don't know how much you know about him, Bees. How many times have you produced content around this man? Probably about 40 pieces in the past 2 weeks.
Yeah, not quite that many, but it's not the first time he's been linked either, because when the new one came up, I always sort of search back. I think I've written about him before, and I think it was December 2021, something like that. There was links then. And obviously they've come up again. I mean, I think it's easy to see why he's being linked. I mean, you only have to look at the top of his FB ref page and see the players he's similar to. And it's Bellingham's in his top 10. Top guy is Alexis McAllister. Conor Gallagher, number 2. He's been linked with Liverpool. Kefran Turam, number 3. I think he's been linked with Liverpool this week. All right. Most midfielders are getting linked with Liverpool in some way or another. But he's another guy who's sort of falling into that pattern of players that Liverpool do appear to be looking at and interested in and stuff like this. And it's interesting. The Bayern move obviously doesn't seem to have worked out for him. I did see he's only made one league start, and he got substituted at halftime in that game. So, as you mentioned, whether Tuchel will be more inclined to use him, it doesn't seem to have been yet. I guess he'll probably review the squad in the summer and stuff like that, whether Gravenberch will still be there or whatever.
Obviously...
Carry on.
Go on.
Well, no, I was only going to say that the thing that caught my eye, that sort of most interests me about him, was in a review of the Eredivisie last season, the Opta end of season review and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And he wasn't in the team of the season, but they had some stats on attacking sequence involvements. So whether a player's taking a shot, assisting a shot, or being involved in a possession sequence that leads to a shot. And Gravenberch had an average of 7.3 per 90 minutes, which was the 4th most. And he was actually ahead of Cody Gakpo for this. And this is Gakpo when he scored, I think, 12 goals and got 12 assists or something like that. And obviously Gravenberch isn't posting numbers, anything like that, but he's actually involved in build-up play more than Gakpo. And I think he was the top player as well for the sort of pre-assist stat, which is the pass to the person who creates the goal. And stuff like that. So he's ranking well in those sort of metrics. So maybe not somebody to add the goals and assists from midfield as we've just been talking about, but definitely somebody who can be involved in the sort of stage prior to that.
Yeah, he's an interesting target actually. I think I'll be honest, when we first got linked with him, I was a bit unsure. Simply because of this, going back to this issue Liverpool have, it for me all season, I've been saying it on this podcast, it is a defensive issue. We need to be better at extinguishing fires and keeping control of the ball and initiating these waves after waves of attack by sweeping up loose balls and things like that. And I looked at Gravenberch and thought, he's a good player, obviously. Does he address that concern? I don't know. But despite that, he is obviously a massive talent. He's Ajax's youngest ever player for the start. So he's very physically mature for his age. About 6'2", 6'3". Still only 20 years old. as I said, he was presented with his debut before like Marco van Basten, Johan Cruyff, Frank Rijkaard, all these absolute Dennis Bergkamp, all these absolute Ajax legends, Matthias de Ligt. Gravenberch is the youngest ever player of that club, which is definitely saying something. As a result of coming out of the Ajax academy, he's very, very technical. He's kind of a joy to watch when he's in full flight. He reminds me a little bit of kind of like an Eze for Crystal Palace almost when he's gliding with the ball and when he's carrying it. He's a keen ball carrier, and Curtis Jones is a little bit like that too. But yeah, he's an obvious talent, and I think that's the big thing for me. I think regardless of what he addresses, I think the fact of the matter is he's so young at the minute, and his education, obviously in terms of football, has been really good, and he's got that kind of base to be world class. He's got that world class potential, and if you put that under the wing of Jurgen Klopp, who's obviously proved to be a master of getting the most out of rough diamonds, those two could be kind of a match made in heaven, really. And I think obviously moving towards this potential 3-2-5 shape, again, I think it benefits him. It's influenced my perspective a little bit on whether he's a suitable target or not, because in that system, the number 8s form part of the attacking bank of 5 rather than conducting defensive duties, covering fullbacks and engaging in build-up play in deeper areas and things like that. So I think I actually gradually played more of a final third role for them. I think he gradually started to play a bit more advanced. And again, previously I would have thought that's a problem. Why are we getting another player like this? But now I can see the logic behind it if we're going to keep this kind of system. But overall, I mean, roundabout way of saying it, overall, I'm not against it or anything like that. I'd be curious to see the price though.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I mean, I think as well, what we've got to remember, we always, we speculate about these players and where they might play and stuff like this. But then, Klopp's got a bit of form for taking players, particularly Dutch players, for some reason, and sort of changing the way they play and stuff like that. Obviously, Wijnaldum, more of an attacking midfielder, then becomes a bit more sort of defensively minded. Gakpo's a left winger who now seems to be being used in a sort of false 9 role more often than not. So we could talk about what Gravenberch sort of currently does and what he did for Ajax and stuff like that. But obviously, Klopp might have something different in mind as well. But I agree what you say about, he looks great in full flow. I mean, if you watch any of his highlight videos, what you'll see time and again, receiving the ball with his back to goal, sort of around the centre circle and something like that, and spinning his marker and just heading off towards goal and stuff like that. He seems to be excellent at that. Obviously, a lot of those clips are the in Dutch football. You have to sort of take that with a pinch of salt. I guess it's not going to be as easy in England and things like that. But yeah, that seems to be, at least from what I've seen, his sort of primary skill is get the ball and just get it upfield and sort of lay it off to whoever it might be. So kind of probably what Liverpool wanted from Naby Keita, but have never really got on a consistent basis. Obviously, because of his fitness issues, he's often done it when he's played, but to get somebody who can do that sort of thing. And I think it was, whether it was on here or something else I've done, talking about, the sort of physical presence in Liverpool's midfield. And they've got some short guys, Elliott and Carvalho, although obviously he may be leaving. There's rumours about that. But obviously, yeah, another sort of decent unit of a guy in there would be no bad thing either. So, he definitely ticks a lot of boxes. As you say, the price is an interesting one because he's going to have a long while left on his contract, and Liverpool haven't tended to go for players in that situation. But clearly, he doesn't seem to have fitted in Munich. And if Tuchel wants to do a rebuild, then he's a saleable asset. So they may be able to sort of strike up a fair deal. So it will be worth keeping an eye on the price. I don't think Liverpool should be going all out sort of Bellingham money or anything like that for him. But I think he'd be a good signing if they can get him.
Yeah, to be honest, if I hadn't seen the reports, I'd have suggested this one's a complete no-goer. Even though he hasn't really played this season, as you say, 1 start and I think 17 appearances from the bench in the Bundesliga. He's even despite his age, he's on about 180, 170 grand a week.
Wow.
And his contract is up until 2027. So that's a big contract. So for him to be sold, you would have thought Liverpool would have to pay that, buy out his contract to get. I'm not going to do the maths on the spot, but that feels like the kind of thing where you just kind of look at that and think, no, he's not going to move. The only way in which I can see it being a possibility, maybe, I think Bayern keep talking about this striker void. They keep obsessing over this fact that they haven't got a striker since they've lost Lewandowski. I've seen them linked with like Victor Osimhen of Napoli and Harry Kane even at Spurs. Maybe if they want to fund a bigger move like that to shape shift the squad a little bit, sacrifice a centre mid for a striker or something. I know Thomas Tuchel's a big fan of strikers, considering he really pushed to get Lukaku to Chelsea a few years back. So potentially there's something in that, but yeah, he is a player, as you say, in terms of physicality, he's definitely got that on his side, and I think if you look at him, you could possibly suggest he has the makeup to be a 6. But then you have to factor in he is quite attack-minded, very technical, likes to carry the ball over large spaces. So that then goes against him playing as a 6, I suppose. But again, if you look at this kind of new system Liverpool have got, I can see him as part of the 2 next to Trent, potentially when we need him. But I can specifically see him further up as one of the 2 advanced 8s. This week, I sent a message to... I speak to a lad who's a video scout in the Eredivisie for one of the clubs in the Eredivisie every now and then. So I just sent him a message and just basically said, should I want this to happen or not? And he just gave me some basics. Like, he said that Ajax played in 2 roles in the 4-3-3 as a left-sided centre mid. Early in his career, he come deeper to get on the ball, and later in his career, he was pushed between the lines a little bit more. And his words were he's ridiculous on the ball for his age, but also got a lot to learn, especially in moments of transition, going both ways. So make what you want from that, I suppose. But he looks like a big talent, is what I'm getting at anyway. And I think that's kind of the bare minimum what you need. A bit like Nunes in many ways. Nunes has still got lots to work on, lots to learn and stuff like that. But if you look at the base of what he's got, and Canate was similar, the base of what these players have got, specifically physically, they're all massive. They're all really mobile, very fast. Things like that, very intense characters and stuff. So I think Gravenberch has enough kind of natural qualities and strengths that are already there for him to become something really special. But how quickly he would get to that, I don't know. And as I said, how much he'd cost, I don't know, considering those contract details.
Yeah, I didn't realise he was on that much money. I mean, that's got to be a salary commitment of like over 30 million or something like that, which is obviously a lot to pay for somebody who might just be not quite one for the future, but obviously one who you've got to sort of help develop and stuff like that. But it is interesting, all these sort of players they're being linked with, like you say, guys like, or have bought, these sort of younger guys, perhaps than they were buying previously. I feel like, they're Mane and Salah and guys like that, maybe 24, 25, and now they're shifting to sort of 22, 23 players like that. But do you think, obviously you said about him, possible issues in transition. I mean, do you think he could work in a Liverpool midfield then? I mean, you mentioned as the, alongside Trent and stuff like that. I mean, I've not seen enough of him myself, but obviously I guess that's, a bit of concern if a scout's saying that about him.
Well, one of the questions I asked him was, is he he's obviously not, but I asked him, is he a passenger on the defensive side? Like, is he the kind of player that you've maybe got to carry, or is he a bit more of a, he'll regain the ball a lot for you? And he said, I'd say he contributed well at Eredivisie level and in the Champions League, but the sample size is a little bit smaller. He's not a passenger, but he's also not super active, is what he said. So, yeah, I think, to be honest, if I was to paint a picture of him, I don't think he's that different to Curtis Jones. I think he's just he's got a much higher ceiling, but he's similar in the sense that he's about as good on the defensive side of the game. Really likes to carry the ball, likes to dribble, a bit expressive and stuff like that. Will be more comfortable higher up in the midfield and in deeper areas, but he could probably do both. Close control and all that stuff. But I think in comparison to Jones, I think he's probably capable as a 6, or could be capable as a 6. He's a lot more physically built. He's 2 years younger still. And as I said, I think he's got more potential. But in terms of player types, like stylistically, I don't think he's that different to Jones based on what I've seen. But that's. I mean, some people might take that as a bad thing. I think Curtis Jones has shown, particularly in the past 3 weeks, that there's a reason that we're still trying to be really patient with this kid. He's still only 22. He does have a lot to his game. And I think past couple of seasons, I don't think Liverpool's midfield makeup has kind of suited what he's about. But I think this now, past couple of weeks, this 3-2-5, we keep going on about it, don't we? But I do think it suits him because it allows him to play in that attack and bank of 5 and play higher up in the final third. So, it's one to keep an eye on. And we certainly need midfielders. So if it's another body, I'll take it. I don't know about you.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's going to be so interesting to see how it all kind of unfolds once the first deal is completed for whoever that is. What sort of role we think they're going to do. Well, then who do they go after that? Like if Gravenberch is the first player to be signed, let's say, for the sake of argument, well, as we've said, it doesn't necessarily solve the issues in Liverpool's midfield. So who do they go for after that and stuff like that? So it will be interesting if they sign him and then he's, not really addressing the issue. You start to think, well, who else is coming in?
Well, how would you feel if it was to come out in the coming days or whatever, that Liverpool have basically done Mount and Gravenberch? How would you feel about that? Would you feel like we need more? Would you feel content, right, we've sorted it? What would your perspective on that be?
I'd be pleased in the sense I think they're both good players, but I'm not sure if it would be addressing the sort of issues that we've talked so often about. But then maybe they would work in this 3-2-5, and that's what Liverpool are going to do next season, and everything looks a bit different. I mean, what would you think if they were the sort of two signings?
I would be happy. I think Mount in particular, I'd be over the moon with, and I think Gravenberch is, as we've touched on, is more than worth a punt. I mean, I'm not sure how much he's going to cost, but this is the same player that was at Ajax last season. I think he's got absolutely bags of potential. Could be an absolute world beater if he maximises his potential and things like that. But I do think there will be part of me that's a bit like, okay, maybe one more. And I'm not specifically sure. I think it'd have to be someone a bit more established than Gravenberch, someone who's a bit more been on the scene a bit longer. And I still like the idea of some kind of ball winner in there. I know that this kind of 3-2-5 doesn't necessarily suggest that we need one of those players, because obviously you've got Trent as a situational 6, Fabinho as a 6, and Besetic as a potential 6 at times. Henderson can play there. I suppose Thiago at times can play there in the 2. So there wouldn't be as much of a need for a ball winner, but I do like the idea of getting one in. And I think Caicedo, for example, is very well suited to what Liverpool have suffered from this season in terms of extinguishing those fires and giving the likes of Salah and Trent and Diaz, whoever it may be, a platform to just kind of go and win the game in the final third. But it's going to be interesting to see who Liverpool end up getting anyway. But Bees, yeah, thanks for joining us, mate.
No worries, happy to anytime. Hopefully, I guess we might have 2 games to talk about next week, because I think, is it West Ham on Wednesday next week? I think something like that. So
I don't even know that. I'll double check that now.
It's definitely, I'm pretty sure they're playing midweek against West Ham, and obviously Nottingham Forest on Saturday. So I guess we might have a couple of games to talk about next week.
Yeah, well, hopefully we pick up 2 wins. And if we do, the next conversation we have will probably revolve around whether Liverpool can get 4th or not. That was on the agenda a little bit today, actually, but I just thought it's a bit too early. It's 1 win. Let's not get carried away. But yeah, hopefully Liverpool can pick up 2 wins, and hopefully we can turn this 6-1 win over Leeds into an element of form. But yeah, thanks for tuning in, and we will see you next week.